Okay, the art of purging, one of my favourite topics. I spent a huge amount of time purging in the first half of my ceremonies, and you know, I've got to say I was like outstanding star compared to most people. Like, if there's someone going to win the prize of the person that purged the most for the night, it was generally me. So don't be put off, don't be scared. I'm seen to be an exception. Well, but I think first of all, I guess before I had did my first ceremonies, one of the reasons I was a bit put off by ayahuasca was I'd watched a lot of YouTube videos and things and people purging and things like this, and I thought, God, why would I want to do that? It wasn't that much fun. But I realised actually, sort of fairly early on the piece actually, that purging, there's vomiting and being sick, and then purging is actually has a different meaning, and obviously the word purging is we're getting something out. And so what I realised is I'd go in with an intention to say, for example, to clear out. I had sexual abuse when I was very young, and I was holding on to a lot of things were there, and so I go into with the intention of clearing out anything I've got I'm holding on to in my body about that. And what happens for me is once the medicines start to work, ayahuasca's, again, this is just my perspective, but ayahuasca's job is to find the energy that we're holding on to that's connected to our intention, if that's what she deems fit for that evening, But so what she does is she goes through and finds, in this example, anywhere in my body where I'm holding on to energy that I'm, obviously unaware of in relation to my intention. And again, this is just my interpretation of what I've experienced, and your experience may be completely different. But so then, and then she sort of says, "Well, okay, I found this energy. I found this. Where you're holding on to this stuff. What do you want to do with it?" And of course, in the early ceremonies, you're kind of not really. Well, I wasn't really. Didn't have as much presence about myself as I did now, and I was certainly very much a babe in the woods and really didn't know what I was getting myself in for. So I've learnt a lot. But and then I'm able to use, sometimes I'm able to use my own techniques, energy releasing techniques for moving the energy, and I bring some of the, those practices in. But often a lot of the stuff again is so subconscious and so deep, especially when we start to get into real deep stuff like the intention I shared with you before. There's so much energy there that I can't shift it myself, and so the medicine says, grandmothers, it purges it out of your system. So quite often, when I'm vomiting or purging, I can feel this negative energy coming out of my body, and it's like hallelujah. It's like, so whilst the whole thought about being sick and vomiting is not pleasant, when I feel, for me, I can feel this old stuff coming out. It's like just completely different experience, So that's just a little bit of a perspective, I guess, on purging, and what it actually, well, for me, what it really means. And so some people go into these ceremonies with the idea that they're a hero if they don't purge. Well, for me, it's like, especially if you're at the start of this process, unless and there's a lot of people that do come in that are very, very clean and they've done a lot of work on themselves over the years and don't have I think we've always got stuff to clean out, but they've dealt with a lot of their deep, big, obvious issues, so their ceremonies, for their first ceremonies, are a lot more smoother than perhaps mine, where I had a lot of deep issues that I hadn't dealt with, and so I needed to do more of the cleaning work up front. It's just all different, but really, again, develop your own methodologies or techniques for shifting your energy if you can before you come. Don't get panicked if you don't, but it's just something that you can introduce that can just change things. In terms of actually purging itself, so some of these ceremonies, retreat centers, Malukas I've been into, we're sitting up. Most of them we're lying down. So some of them I'm sort of lying on these half chair things. Some it's a yoga mat. But you know, it depends on really how much purging you're doing. Sometimes it can just be up and it's done. Sometimes it can be a very long, you know, sometimes in those early ceremonies when I was clearing deep stuff like the trauma I mentioned in a previous video that I was holding on to from these operations that I had as a young baby. I think I must have purged for 2 or 3 hours. You know, it was like not constantly, but pretty constant. And but as I said, you know, felt this massive relief the next day. It's such a huge lightness, like just all this gone. So, you know, while it wasn't pleasant at the time, you know, to shift that much in one evening was, you know, for me, it's just outweighs the, you know, any perceived sort of pain or discomfort that I go through during the process. But the best way to purge is to get on your hands and knees on your all fours. I'm not going to do it now, but I think you probably know what I'm talking about. And sort of have the bucket underneath your mouth, so your head's sort of looking at the ground. You know, your hands are on the ground and your knees are, you're on your knees. And that is I've found the best way to, you know, if I'm purging a lot, just to be able to let it flow freely. If you're sitting up and you're trying to lean over like this, it's, you know, it can be very painful. So. You know, just a practical little tip there for you. You know, they've always provide toilet paper and things like this, you know, for cleaning yourself afterwards, mouth, whatever, especially if you haven't shaved for a while. You know, I always take an extra bit myself because I tend to be a big purger. So, yeah. And I guess another little insight is, you know, I found that when I first started with the ceremonies, I could feel, you know, I was new, and I'd feel all this energy coming up, and it was quite overwhelming, and there was an urge to kind of fight it, you know, like I said before, distract myself or whatever. And, you know, oops, what I've learned is, you know, that the more I hold on and fight it, you know, the more uncomfortable the experience is. It's like anything in life, really. If you think about it, if you're having an argument with someone, the more you hold on to that, you know, the more painful it becomes, and the more it escalates. And it's the same thing. It's just a micro version, really, I guess, in the ceremony. So if you hold it on to something, it's like, you know, it just keeps you in that state. But you know, the medicines are there to get you out of that state. So you're sort of fighting yourself and fighting the medicines, and so it can become quite a, you know, bit of a struggle. So. Again, those processes, letting go. So yeah. All right. So just a few tips here on the art of purging, and more importantly, you know, I think just understanding that it's actually a good thing. You know, it's something to welcome and something not to fight, and something not to be afraid of, and something, you know, once you know, perhaps have that experience of actually feeling you clearing the stuff out, and just the whole beautiful experience, and you know, that straight after the ceremony or the next day of just next few days, you know, it's like. It's all worth it. All right, thanks.